chat a little bit about, thank you again for the opportunity to chat a little bit about the Green Communities Guide. This is an initiative of Land Stewardship Centre. And I'll talk a little bit about Land Stewardship Centre just to get us started. For those of you who are not familiar with this organization, it was established in 1996. So we're currently celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. We're a registered charity with a volunteer board of directors, and we also receive additional guidance from program advisory committees. And we have a small group of core staff members that work on several types of initiatives, and I will list some of them in one of the upcoming slides. So Land Stewardship Centre, I might refer to during the presentation as LSC. It's just a lot faster to say. So our approach to our work really centralizes around these three terms: engaging, informing, and enabling. So we engage individuals, community groups, and partners to identify needs related to stewardship. We inform through partnerships and relationships, building networks. And then we enable stewards and stewardship action through the programs, resources, and tools that we create. So those are sort of the three main foundational pillars of the work that we do at Land Stewardship Centre. And we help people. Our efforts help people to understand the value of ecosystem services. So those valuable services that we get from nature that are beneficial to humans. We recognize important stewardship priorities and apply key principles of stewardship in decision-making around land and resource use. And we always strive to learn from those who provide a good example of what stewardship looks like in practice. So the work that we do directly complements Nature Calgary's efforts to support local stewardship. And I wanted to put this quote up because I think it really goes back to what our approach is at Land Stewardship Centre. So this is a quote by Ernie Watershed. He was one of the three founders of Land Stewardship Centre and a past executive director as well. And he says, if you want to make any progress in stewardship and biodiversity conservation, you have to work directly with and know how to speak with the people who manage and operate on the land. So really getting out into the community and talking to stakeholders and getting those different perspectives is important in the work that we do at LSC. So our core programs include the Green Acreages program, which I work on, the Green Communities Guide, which I also work on and will be chatting about further today, the Watershed Stewardship Grant Program, the Conservation Land Registry, the Conservation Easement Registry, and the Alberta Stewardship Network. So in looking at the history, this being the 25th year of Land Stewardship Centre, the founders of LSC saw a need to expand stewardship efforts beyond just wetlands and waterfowl, which they were working on prior to that, to include the bigger picture. So fostering a stewardship ethic to manage all natural capital. And this is the foundation on which LSC has built all of its programs, and that has also guided the work that we do today. So there is some connectivity between LSC and Nature Calgary. For those of you who have been at Nature Calgary for a longer time, you might remember some of these things. So in kind of digging through our archives, I was able to find that through our Watershed Stewardship Grant, we at LSC have funded Nature Calgary for several years to do initiatives such as shoreline cleanups, and some work with invasive weeds. So that's pretty cool. And there's a long-standing relationship between our two organizations. In addition to this, the Watershed Stewardship Grant, which is one of LSC's core programs, has supported a lot of the places where Nature Calgary's members like to go for birding, for different outdoor activities. And I thought it would be cool to show some of the places in Calgary that the Watershed Stewardship Group or Grant Program is working. So for Friends of Fish Creek Provincial Park Society, there have been a few different watershed stewardship grant opportunities there. And some of the initiatives that have been funded are things like a tree mapping project, as well as a rock dam research project, water and wildlife monitoring, invasive weed control, beaver management, speaker series, park watch, and park and trail care. And then for Weaselhead Glenmore Park Conservation Society, last year and this year, they are the recipients of the Watershed Stewardship Grant. And they are assessing the environmental impacts of the ring road that's being constructed in Calgary and looking at mitigation measures and their efficacy. So they're kind of studying the construction project before, during, and after with the ring road, and looking at how to best mitigate the environmental impacts of that new part of Stony Trail. And then the Elbow River Partnership, they were sponsored to do some outreach messaging and materials about the importance of the watershed and stewardship thereof. For Western Sky Land Trust, they were working on awareness of conservation easements and land gifts for conservation. And Friends of Confederation Creek are doing a stream daylighting project this year. And this could potentially become a case study for the Green Communities Guide. And I'll talk a little bit about that down the road in the presentation. But through traditional and digital media, the Friends of Confederation Creek will increase awareness of their watershed and both the threats that it faces and the opportunities that exist for improving watershed health. So another place, obviously, that people from Nature Calgary might be familiar with that has been funded by the WSG is the Inglewood Bird Sanctuary. So another way, in addition to funding through the Watershed Stewardship Grant, that Land Stewardship Centre is supporting local stewardship efforts in Calgary is through the new Green Communities Guide. And that's what we're really here to talk about today, is the Green Communities Guide. We call it version 2.0 because it has been updated this year. Oops, I don't know why this keeps flipping forward. Sorry about that. So this is a free resource, and it's a companion to the work that Nature Calgary is already doing. It can add value to community stewardship efforts in urban and peri-urban areas like Calgary. So the Green Communities Guide provides real-world local examples that help growing communities plan and implement strategies to conserve water, protect water quality, preserve agricultural land, and protect critical open spaces and wildlife habitat. So over the years, the Green Communities Guide has resonated deeply with municipalities and the stewardship community across Alberta. Municipalities including the MD of Foothills, Parkland County, and the County of Vermilion River continue to utilize the fundamentals from the original Green Communities Guide, which was published in print in 2009, to guide their sustainability and land use planning efforts. Now, we're hoping that this new version is going to reach even more municipalities, even more local stewardship groups, developers, all different kinds of folks that are involved in potentially implementing nature-based solutions and championing them in their communities. So with the refreshed focus that we have on nature-based solutions and new methods of delivery, including the digital narrative and an online format, the new Green Communities Guide presents audiences with nature-based climate solutions that promote and support sustainable development and the conservation of valuable natural resources. So the new Green Communities Guide is available online, and as such, it's readily available to all stakeholders across the province and beyond to help plan and implement strategies to conserve valuable natural assets as communities grow and expand. So let me just double check that there's nothing in the chat. All right. So why now? Why did we decide to do this? So the updated Green Communities Guide conveys knowledge that helps to advance development solutions that offer climate, biodiversity, and other mutual benefits for people and for nature. So the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, defines nature-based solutions, or NBS, as actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural and modified ecosystems in ways that address societal changes effectively and adaptively, to provide both human well-being and biodiversity benefits. They are underpinned by benefits that flow from healthy ecosystems and target major challenges like climate change, disaster risk reduction, food and water security, health, and are critical to economic development. So this new version of the Green Communities Guide really dives into this concept of nature-based solutions and how they can be applied at a variety of scales in municipalities and communities across Alberta and beyond. And the focus is on utilizing nature-based solutions to support community resiliency. And that's a really key and emerging need among developers and municipalities, given the issues associated with global climate change. And considering the current global pandemic that we're also living through, building back better, so building community health, sustainability, and resiliency is more critical now than ever. So since the website launched, greencommunitiesguide.ca, so you can see that the URL is at the bottom of your screen. If you're really keen, you can type it into your browser and start looking around. I am going to do a little bit of a tour through the website, and of course, everybody will be encouraged to explore it more after the presentation as well. But since we launched the website in July of this year, we have had over 1,100 visitors, almost 1,550 sessions on the site, and almost 4,200 page views. So people are spending around 3 minutes per visit on the site, which doesn't sound like much, but if you've ever managed a website, that's actually quite a long visit. Just have somebody in the chat here. Could you please give us some practical examples of what your organization does? Yes, absolutely. So I'll pause the presentation to answer this question that came from Val. So I'm just going to go back in my slides to the list of our, that's here, what we do. So the programs that we have include the Green Acreages program. So through the Green Acreages program, I work with acreage owners, hobby farm owners, and recreational property owners across the province. And we provide resources, including the Green Acreages Guide, which is this binder, which is sort of a comprehensive tool to help you manage your property in a more sustainable way. And I also administer a funding program through that Green Acreages program. So we help to support through the Government of Alberta's Watershed Resiliency and Restoration Program initiatives on private property such as riparian planting, wetland restoration, exclusion fencing to protect riparian zones, and bioswales, rain gardens, things that enhance the natural watershed function and mitigate the effects of flooding and drought. So that's the Green Acreages program. The Green Communities Guide is what we're going to be talking about for the remainder of the presentation, so I'll leave that one. The Watershed Stewardship Grant Program is another example of Land Stewardship Centre administering funds to local stewardship groups. And these funds go to some of the projects like the ones that I mentioned that are happening or have happened in the past in Calgary. So I hope that answers your question. And I'll get back to where I was in the presentation. So in terms of our website visitors, Edmonton and Calgary have been the top 2 places that people have been visiting the Green Communities Guide through, but we do have visitors and visitation from all across the country, North America and beyond. So we have a lot of pins on our little map so far, and we're hoping that it goes even further. So here's a quote from the executive director of Land Stewardship Centre, Brian Ilnicki. And this is just another example of Land Stewardship Centre developing a resource that helps to engage, inform, and enable stewardship at a broader level. So by individuals, but also by groups. So nature-based solutions are great. However, these solutions and how to implement them are not widely known or well understood. So awareness and greater understanding of nature-based solutions are both needed to promote and increase adoption of these viable approaches to sustainable development. So showing communities what NBS are and that they are often more cost-effective to climate hazard mitigation than things like gray infrastructure or hard engineering solutions, as well as showcasing success in different sizes of communities, will really help to mainstream their uptake in Alberta. So we're going to jump right into the website now. So before we do that, oops, I don't know why it keeps flipping forward. I'm sorry about that, everybody. So before we do that, just a few notes on why we didn't do another print or PDF format. So LSC was really, really interested in making the Green Communities Guide more widely accessible, to connect people with the content in a different and better way, to make it available to everyone, not just people who are in the know about the resource, but have it be something that people could stumble upon or be shared very simply, as opposed to the old one, which was quite a thick book that you would have to order and pay for. And really importantly too, we can keep this website up to date and keep it dynamic. We can be adding real world examples through our news feed and our case studies and adding to those on an ongoing basis. So we did launch this in July, but it's something that I still work on every day of the week, except for the weekend. But it is something that I'm still working on and still adding content to on an ongoing basis. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can share the website. There we go. So the Green Communities Guide is sort of like an online book. It has a few different ways to navigate it. You can use these quick links that are on the home page. You can go to About, and that will take you to the guide or the case studies or the Stewardship Directory, which I'll talk about momentarily. Or you can go to this table of contents for the guide itself. So you can see here that these first 8 chapters are sort of the foundational information about nature-based solutions. And they sort of set the stage for chapter 9, which has many sub-chapters, as you can see. These are all the types of nature-based solutions that we have highlighted so far. And as I mentioned, I'm still working on adding some more content to this. So there might be a topic on there that I'm still working on. And then we, of course, have case studies with real-world examples of nature-based solutions in practice in Alberta. So we'll start maybe with the introduction. This is an introduction to the guide itself. You can see when you click on it, like a book, it's got the table of contents on the left-hand side. So you can navigate that way or go back to where it says the guide and navigate through the table of contents in that way. So this is just an introduction to, why we refreshed the Green Communities Guide, why it's got this new sort of focus. And then we have this part on nature-based solutions. And it really talks about, what NBS are, why they're important, how they have a host of multiple benefits to different aspects of society and nature, and why they are resilient against climate change hazards. And then we go into NBS more deeply by talking about NBS and ecosystem services and biodiversity. So the relationship between NBS and those two concepts. So this is sort of NBS and the environment. We talk about NBS and community livability. So under livability, we have a lot of different topics here, including physical and mental health of humans, social fabric, recreation, and even real estate marketability, as it does relate to the prevalence of nature-based solutions in green and blue space in our communities. That is a reality. And then we talk a little bit about municipal planning, how it relates to NBS, and how important it is to plan for resilience and leverage nature-based solutions where possible, and how to mainstream them. And lastly, we talk about the business side of nature-based solutions. So this is information that's really getting at how to put a value, a monetary value on some of these benefits that are provided, and looking at evaluation of many of the externalities that are difficult to account for in a full cost accounting, such as ecosystem services and long-term benefits in terms of mitigating the risk of climate hazards. As we all know that climate change is on our doorstep. So this just has a lot of tools for trying to come up with a correct and reasonable value for the risk mitigation and some of the sort of co-benefits of nature-based solutions, in addition to the sort of core reason why you would be implementing that solution in that particular case. And then we go into the implementation overview. So this is where we get into the different types of NBS themselves. And you can find these in the guide under Chapter 9, just as an alphabetized list, or you can also search them by theme. So in this themes menu, we have categorized nature-based solutions based on those that are related to ecosystem management, ecosystem protection, ecosystem restoration, and those that are more related to infrastructure itself. So you can choose whichever you like. And this is where I would like somebody from the audience to unmute themselves and shout out one of these headings for me to click on so that you can help me navigate through this website. So don't be shy. Hopefully somebody will unmute.
Ecosystem restoration.
Thank you, Lenora. Ecosystem restoration. Would somebody else like to shout out one of these topics for us to look into further?
Could we have something on Brownfields reclamation and naturalization, please?
Absolutely, Sid. Thank you. Okay, so we are going over to Brownfields, Reclamation, and Naturalization. So this is essentially what all of our implementation overviews will look like. They will have a definition if there's a term that needs to be defined at the beginning, followed by recommended practices for anybody looking to implement this type of initiative. Those are always followed by project planning considerations. The business side, so some of the economic benefits and considerations. The nature side, so this is looking at the impacts of this type of nature-based solution intervention on things like biodiversity and the provision of ecosystem services. And then the community side, so this is looking at recreation, real estate marketability, as well as human, physical, mental, and social health. And just like all of our other chapters, we've got our footnotes expanded here. You can see that lots of these have links. So where there is an online version of these sources, you can link right to them through this. And you can also see all of our sources listed here. And I've got another question in the chat. Oh, that's a good question. Does the LSC have a formal relationship with the Nature Conservancy of Canada? Irene, I am going to have to get your email address and answer that question to you later because I'm actually not 100% sure. I know that that we're all sort of aware of the NCC, but I don't know from an organizational standpoint if we have a formal relationship with them. So I'd love to get back to you on that. Okay. So we'll go back to the presentation. Oops. So this quote here is from a city planner with the City of Edmonton, and this was his take on getting the Green Communities Guide shared with him early on. So he really highlighted how useful it was for his work and for other people that are involved in planning and development, either redevelopment or new developments in urban and peri-urban areas. So I'll let everybody read that quote. And nature-based solutions are sometimes called the forgotten solution. So nature is actually one of the most effective ways of combating climate change, and nature-based climate solutions are actions that are in harmony with nature. They incorporate conservation and support biodiversity protection, and they can be very cost effective, as we've seen in some of our cases. So I'm going to go back to the website. And I'm going to go now to a case study. So by using the reaction button on your Zoom, could I get a show of hands from people raising their hand on Zoom? How many of you have ever been to Dale Hodges Park in Calgary? Oh, I got some thumbs up, some hands. Awesome. I also now know that lots of people are awake. Thumbs up, hands. Nice. Okay, so it looks like a handful of you have visited Dalhousie Park, which is great. I have not had the opportunity yet, but I have learned quite a lot about it through developing this case study. So we'll go into the case study, and we've got an overview, kind of who was involved, what the objectives were for the municipality, some of the sort of story of the project as it was being planned, some of the considerations from the business side, the nature side, and the community side. And then we have a photo gallery. So you can see we've got lots of images of this park and some of the features of it, and even a picture of the drainage basin. So it shows which neighborhoods are draining into Dalhousie Park for stormwater treatment before they get re-released into the Bow. So it's a pretty big catchment area, which is pretty cool to see. And if you haven't heard of the Dalhousie Park, I'd encourage you to spend some time on our website checking it out. So Sid, I don't know if you have your hand up because you've been to Dalhousie or because you have a question. So feel free to unmute yourself and let me know.
I was there in the very early stages of the development. I have to admit, I haven't been back in 2-3 years.
Okay, well, maybe next summer that'll be a place for you to add to your list.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that wetland was promising.
Yeah, it looks very cool, and it's something that I'd like to check out as well. Next summer, if I have the chance to be in the Calgary area, I'd like to check that out.
Just related to that there, Nate, I belong to the Biodiversity Advisory Committee, and we had a field trip there led by the City of Calgary guide talking about how it all got developed and how it all works, et cetera, et cetera. So just as an aside, I think it gives me a incentive actually to contact the city to see if we can arrange a guided outing with the planners or the people from Calgary Parks. I think that's a great idea. And I thank you for jogging my mind on that one.
You're so welcome. Yeah, I think that would be really cool for your members to get that opportunity to visit it. And we did get a quote from Tristan Certes from Saint Poisson. He was involved in the planning and evolution. Sorry, I don't know why my screen keeps flipping like that. In the evolution of the Dalhousie Park. And this is what he had to say. So he says, the way we think and work with the environment are galvanized through connecting with each other, sharing insights, lessons learned, and models of best practice. Land Stewardship Center's Green Communities Guide champions the people and projects making these advancements for our province and creates a space to connect. So we also have a companion resource to the Green Communities Guide, and this is called the Stewardship Directory. So the Stewardship Directory is available in tandem with the Green Communities Guide. So I'll share my screen again. Sorry, I keep flipping back and forth between the website, but I want to show you guys this in real time. So if we go to Green Communities Guide, you can either access it from the homepage here, access the Stewardship Directory, or under About, you can access Stewardship Directory there as well. So this is really a community of practice. Everybody who's listed here has listed themselves. I would really encourage Nature Calgary and probably several of those of you on the call, if you have any expertise in the field of nature-based solutions or in stewardship in general, to list yourself on this directory. So we can search the directory. This is what it looks like. You can see we've got a lot of listings in Alberta. So we can search by Calgary and see who's there so far. So Calgary River Valleys, Ghost Watershed Alliance Society, Weaselhead Glenmore. So definitely there's room for a lot more Calgary organizations to list themselves on here, and that's very easy to do. So just under Get Listed, add me to the Stewardship Directory. And you basically just create a little profile for your organization or business. And you can add a logo or not, and then submit it, and you'll add a pin to the map, and you'll be part of the Stewardship Directory. And so part of the point of this is connecting people to expertise and people with experience in either local stewardship or in the implementation of nature-based solutions. So while folks are, coming up with things that they could be doing, this is an opportunity to get connected with others who may have that expertise. So Sid, I see your hand is up again. Did you have another question?
No, sorry, I haven't figured out how to get that hand back.
No problem. Okay. So we are winding down here, folks. If anybody's getting tired, the PowerPoint is coming to a close. Okay. So the Green Communities Guide does support urban and rural communities. Obviously, it's completely relevant to a city like Calgary, and we've found many examples of NBS in action in Calgary, and I'm just working on developing some new case studies for that. And the real impact that we're hoping that the Green Communities Guide will have is helping to mainstream nature-based solutions in their implementation, encouraging communities to lean on nature and nature-based solutions in order to help build back better after the pandemic, and really enabling various stakeholders to support sustainable development goals in this way, while also supporting resilient communities and biodiversity. Okay, so I have a question from Brooke. Does the Stewardship Directory contain just organizations or initiatives and projects as well? Thank you for your question, Brooke. It just contains organizations or individuals with expertise. And what we're going to do for initiatives and projects is in the next slide, if I can click here, is part of our call to action. So we would love if everybody who's on the call would explore this digital platform at greencommunitiesguide.ca, share the resource with your networks, and contact Land Stewardship Centre. Contact me directly if you have any ideas for case studies. This is something that we're going to be building on an ongoing basis, and that's where projects and initiatives, Brooke, would be in the case studies section of the Green Communities Guide. So any ideas for new case studies are greatly appreciated, and we would love for Nature Calgary and other organizations in the Calgary area to make themselves a listing on the Stewardship Directory and join that community of practice. And in whatever capacity you are an advocate for nature as part of Nature Calgary, calling on your elected officials and your city government to have more nature-based solutions and to protect and enhance the nature that exists in your city, I think would be really fantastic. So we have something from the chat. Do you operate in BC too? I would think there would be a lot of work for you in remediation after all the flooding. So we do operate primarily in Alberta. However, this resource is available to everybody, including our neighbors in BC. And I do think that this resource could be really helpful in those communities that need to rebuild after those devastating floods, for sure. And the second question from Val is, to list yourself, don't you need to have some expertise to offer? Yes. If you feel you have some expertise to offer, please do list yourself. If not, you can join the community of practice by connecting with those people that have that expertise. Could even be an interesting opportunity for more speakers for your speaker series. So we would love it if you would keep connected with us at Land Stewardship Centre. So you can contact me directly. My name is Milena, so Milena at landstewardshipcentre.org, landstewardship.org, sorry. And this is my phone number. You can reach Land Stewardship Centre at our website or the Green Communities Guide at greencommunitiesguide.ca. The Stewardship Directory, of course, you can access through Green Communities Guide or at stewardshipdirectory.com if you want to go directly to it. We also have social media. So one of my colleagues is really active on social media. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And I know that we've got some time left, so I would love to take any more questions that anybody wants to pop in the chat, or maybe unmute yourself, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
That's great information there, Milena. I have a couple of questions myself.
Sure, go ahead, John.
One thing I came up with is a couple of questions. One, you mentioned that early on in your presentation about funding. You funded like the Watershed grant fund, those types of funding. So can organizations apply for grants through you, through your Land Stewardship Center? And where would that funding actually come from?
Yeah, so the Watershed Stewardship Grant is one of the larger granting programs that we have at LSC. And so that money does come from Government of Alberta and is administered by Land Stewardship Centre. So organizations that want to do something to enhance their watershed, whether that is through an outreach and education campaign, monitoring, riparian restoration. There's a very, very wide variety of projects that could be eligible for the Watershed Stewardship Grant. So if you're interested in that program specifically, I'd encourage you to visit the landstewardship.org website and search for the Watershed Stewardship Grant. It'll be in the programs at the top of the page. And you can see a story map of past initiatives that have been funded and get a bit more information, both about your watershed and about the funding program. So that happens once a year. I think that the deadline, I don't want to misspeak, but I think that the deadline will be still not coming up for a few months. So if you are interested in putting together an application for the Watershed Stewardship Grant Program, I would encourage you to do so. The other funding program that we administer at LSC is through green acreages. So for acreage owners, hobby farm owners, or recreational property owners, especially those lakefront properties, we do have some funding available for cost share stewardship projects. So these will have to enhance natural watershed function and show some impact on mitigating the effects of flooding and drought.
Okay, thank you for that. Kind of related to that, that directory looks really interesting and such a valuable resource. I'm wondering if there are various funding agencies that could possibly provide funding for some ecological or nature-based solutions could be listed or searched out and listed on that site. So if there are groups across the province who are looking for some additional funding for their own nature-based solutions plans or IDs, they could be a one-stop shopping for them to look for funding agencies.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And we are looking to expand the Stewardship Directory to be as useful as possible. And I think that having potential funders listed there is really important. So I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's see what else. Well, the City of Calgary, I'm kind of curious, have you had any contact with the City of Calgary related to what you're doing, what expertise and resources you have to offer?
We are actually working at LSC because of the recent municipal elections. We're working on a short video and an overview of our programs and resources that we have available to municipalities and elected officials. And so we're working on something to send out to them hopefully early in the new year.
Perfect.
Because I think everybody is sort of bogged down in budgets right now. But we do want the newly elected officials to be aware of the programs and services that we have available that can support their work.
Perfect. I think that's a great idea. I know Calgary had a project called Great Communities Guide, which they renamed to something like Local Area Planning Guide. So
Okay.
that type of resource could be useful for local communities within Calgary to, tweak or to try to encourage nature-based solutions within their own community. So I think that's another good resource to maybe contact the various communities across the city to let them know of the resource that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. I'm just making some notes actually of your ideas, John.
Yeah. Well, we have something like 200 and some odd communities that make up Calgary, and they're all through various types of plans or planning sessions, or it might be an idea for some of the local communities to know that there's a resource out there that they can tap into.
Yeah, and like I said in the call to action slide, if you have connections in your network that you think could benefit from this resource, it's free. We want it to be accessed by as many people as might be interested. So please do share it with your networks.
And just final question on my part, anyway, kind of related to that. So if a local group wanted to undertake a nature-based solution project, can they ask the Land Stewardship Centre for advice for the planning and implementation of any sort of nature-based solution that they're looking at?
Yeah, so we're sort of a knowledge broker in a sense. So I have learned a ton about nature-based solutions in developing the content for this website over the past year. But I still don't consider myself an expert in the implementation of NBS. I think that there are a lot of practitioners out there with good on the ground experience. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to include the Stewardship Directory as a companion resource so that we can start to build up that repository of expertise, so that when a community or a municipality comes to us, or a developer comes to us and says, we saw this guide, we'd like to make, maybe a bioswale as part of this development that we're doing, or we'd like to do this, for us to have that information available to be able to make those connections, I think is where LSC provides a lot of value. But we're still in the development phase of gathering all of those contacts. We have some that are sort of ad hoc from case studies that we've done. One of our case studies is on soil bioengineering. So I know who to call if I have questions about that specifically, but we are building that up. Yeah.
Perfect. We have a comment from Lenora in the chat.
Okay. I've been very disappointed with the extensive use of riprap along the riverbanks and elsewhere for remediation post the 2013 flood. I feel it is very sterile and not at all nature friendly. I am not sure of the relevance of this to what you're doing. Yeah, so actually that ties in perfectly with what I was just saying about soil bioengineering. Soil bioengineering is listed in the guide. It's something that you can read about a bit more. And there's a case study from Devon where there was a lot of erosion of the bank there and some localized flooding. So soil bioengineering is essentially, in its simplest form, cutting willow stakes, sometimes balsam stakes, but usually willow stakes, and staking an area where there has been extensive erosion along a bank, and it improves the shear strength of the bank and establishes woody vegetation and a very strong root base, with plants that can sustain different levels of water. Obviously, willows are happy where there's a bit of localized flooding on them. So that's one sort of alternative to riprap, is soil bioengineering, and it's been shown to be, very effective and has that sort of suite of multiple benefits that a hard engineering solution such as using riprap doesn't provide. It doesn't provide, increased biodiversity, increased recreational opportunities, water filtration, erosion prevention, those sorts of things that something like soil bioengineering can provide.
Thanks for that. Actually, just related to that, I attended a meeting this afternoon with the Biodiversity Advisory Committee, and at that meeting, they had a representative from the City of Calgary talking about their monitoring of riparian health projects. And as you're mentioning, bioengineering is a big component of that. And that just twigs another idea in my mind that we can have a person from the city talk about their bioengineering projects within the city. So thanks a lot for generating that question, and for Lenore for asking it. So that's great stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much. And are there any other questions? Anybody like to unmute themselves or throw a question up in the chat? I'm not sure, John, what time you're planning on wrapping up, but I'm happy to answer some more questions if there are more.
Yeah, we have, certainly time if other people have any questions or comments. I maybe have one question. Nature-based solution. Did I catch that there's some sort of an international group or agency that's promoting this?
Yeah, there are several organizations that are promoting the idea of nature-based solutions. The definition that I provided was from the International Union of Conservation of Nature.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
So the IUCN.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that definition came from. It's a fairly widely accepted definition of NBS, but actually NBS have been promoted widely internationally, and also by the federal government here in Canada. So in the recent speech for the budget, they talked about all the money that they're putting into reforestation. That of course is related to NBS, and some of the money that is going to be allocated to preserving specific types of ecosystems. So that falls under the conservation of ecosystems or preservation of ecosystems type of nature-based solution. So nature-based solutions can include, protecting areas that are already intact, managing ecosystems for specific outcomes, both for nature and for people, restoring ecosystems, so things like riparian restoration or wetland restoration, and then the ones that are more sort of infrastructure based, things like green roofs or green walls, bioswales, that sort of thing that serve a specific sort of infrastructure purpose.
Great, thank you. I don't see any more questions arising in the chat, other than just a very much thank you from a variety of different of the attendees. It's a great resource you guys have developed there. I think it's going to be a well-used resource once the word gets out to the people who would benefit from that. I certainly like the idea of the valuation of ecological services, that concept, because often when you approach council, City of Calgary Council, it's the money angle. How much is this going to save us? What's the monetary value of these services? And that's always the sticky point for us as naturalists, to try to value nature-based solutions. And
yeah, it's hard to put I don't know why my thing disappeared, but I'll just stop sharing my presentation. If anyone needs my contact information, they've probably got it already. But yeah, I think the valuation tools are really important. That's sort of an area that's growing still with NBS as it becomes more mainstream, is being able to establish a good valuation for that. It's something that I studied in grad school, was that concept of ecological economics and how to put a monetary value on something that has a different sort of time and space than the other things that we typically assign a number to. So I think that area is growing, but those are tools that we found out there already that we'd like people to start using now.
Perfect. Yeah, for sure. Very important. Well, thanks, Milena. That was a really great talk, presentation, and I'll be looking through that nice website you've got there, exploring through the area. I'm sure Nature Calgary can make use of that site, hopefully, and we will try to get ourselves listed in there. And I know I will contact some of the other local groups I know of to have them listing in as a resource as well. I belong to this group, Bird Friendly Calgary, and there's various people on there who are quite keen on nature-based solutions, if you want to call it that, for protecting our bird species within the city of Calgary. So a great resource, and I congratulate you and the Land Stewardship Centre for developing it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity, and thanks everyone for your great questions.